Most people think setting up a reptile enclosure is a simple act of care. You build the habitat, dial in the temperatures, drop in the feeders, and watch something ancient and beautiful thrive in your living room. It feels like you are giving a creature a better life than it might have found elsewhere. And in many ways, you are. But the moment you started maintaining the enclosure every single day, you stopped being a keeper and became something else entirely. You became infrastructure. You became the entire ecosystem of every reptile in your care. And what that does to them, what it changes in their bodies, their behavior, their instincts, is something most reptile owners never think about until it is already too deep to ignore. Welcome back to the Reptile Lab. If you are new here, subscribe now, because what you are about to learn will change the way you think about the moment you lift that enclosure lid every morning. Today we are going through 8 things that happen when you keep and feed reptiles every day. Things that are happening right now in your setup, whether you know it or not. And we are going to end with something that most reptile keepers find difficult to hear the first time, but it is the most important thing on this list. Stay with me through all 8, because number 8 is the one that changes everything. Number 1. Their bodies are calibrating to you when you maintain consistent temperatures, lighting cycles, and feeding schedules. Your reptile is not just surviving, it is optimizing. A ball python in the wild expends enormous energy thermoregulating across a landscape, hunting unpredictably, fasting 4 weeks between meals. In your care, that energy budget gets redirected. Fat reserves build more efficiently. Immune function improves. Growth rates in juveniles with consistent high-quality feeding often outpace wild counterparts significantly. Research on captive bearded dragon physiology has shown that animals maintained on stable UVB schedules and varied, nutrient-dense diets develop measurably better bone density and organ health than those kept under inconsistent conditions. A blue-tongued skink in a well-maintained enclosure in January is almost certainly in better physical condition than its wild relatives struggling through the dry season. That animal has recalibrated its entire metabolic strategy around the assumption that your husbandry will be consistent tomorrow. It is not just fed, it is dependent on your precision. Number 2. Their behavioral range has contracted around you. Wild reptiles are opportunists operating across large, variable ranges. A wild monitor lizard may patrol several square miles in a single week. A wild corn snake may move through dozens of micro-habitats searching for prey, warmth, and cover. In captivity, that behavioral range collapses to the size of the enclosure, and it collapses around you. Studies on captive reptile enrichment have found that animals given consistent, predictable keeper interactions show reduced stress hormone profiles compared to those in identical setups with irregular human contact. The territory did not disappear. It tightened into something much smaller, with you at the center of it. Your movements, your schedule, your presence have become the landscape these animals navigate. If you have ever noticed your monitor watching the door before feeding time, that is not coincidence. That is territory management adapted to a 6x4 enclosure. Number 3. Their daily rhythms. Now follow yours. This one surprises new keepers, but it should not. Reptiles are far more cognitively capable than their reputation suggests, especially when it comes to learning patterns tied to food and safety. If you feed your animals at roughly the same time each day, most of them will begin showing anticipatory behavior within a week. A ball python that spent 23 hours motionless will start moving toward the front of the enclosure before you have even touched the lid. Research on learning and conditioning in reptiles, including work with monitor lizards and various colubrid species, has documented associative learning comparable in some respects to what we see in birds and small mammals. They linked the sound of the freezer opening, the smell of thawed prey, the specific vibration of your footsteps, with the arrival of food. A keeper who is 20 minutes late on feeding day often finds their animal pressed against the front glass, running a behavioral program that says, "This is when food arrives." These animals are not passively existing in your care. They are actively modeling your routine and using that model to predict their world. Number 4. They are learning that humans mean safety. in the wild carry an ancient threat response system tuned over millions of years to shoot large moving shapes as predators. A wild-caught animal often never fully overrides this. But well-socialized captive-bred reptile, handled consistently from a young age by a calm, predictable keeper, undergoes something remarkable. It rewrites the threat assessment. Behavioral studies on habituation in captive reptiles have shown that animals with consistent, low-stress keeper interaction show significantly reduced cortisol responses to human presence over time, compared to animals with irregular or stressful handling histories. Your reptile is not becoming fearless. It is doing something more sophisticated. It is placing you in a specific category: large, predictable, warm-associated, fruit-associated, non-threat. That categorization is earned over hundreds of interactions. It can be lost in a few bad ones. And it means the calm, curious animal that crawls onto your hand today is the product of every quiet, consistent moment you have had with it. Number 5. You have created a dependency, and most keepers do not see it until it is too late. This is where the conversation shifts. Everything up to this point has been about what daily, consistent keeping does for the animal. Better bodies, tightened behavioral ranges, learned schedules, rebuilt trust. Most of that is genuinely positive. But there is another side, and it is the one experienced keepers talk about quietly. The reptiles in your care are no longer equipped to survive without you. Not just philosophically, literally. A bearded dragon that has never hunted live prey, ever thermoregulated across a natural thermal gradient, never gone without food for more than 2 weeks, may lack the behavioral toolkit to survive if that support disappears. Documentation from reptile rescue organizations shows that surrendered animals, particularly those from long-term, highly managed care situations, often struggle significantly when placed in new environments or when husbandry standards drop suddenly. They do not adapt quickly. Some deteriorate rapidly. Not because the new environment is terrible, but because they were calibrated to a specific system, and that system is gone. This does not mean careful husbandry is wrong. It means it comes with responsibility. You are not maintaining a pet. You are maintaining an ecosystem for a living animal that has no fallback. Number 6. They are reading you more carefully than you are reading them. You think you are observing your reptile. You watch the feeding response, note the shed cycle, check for signs of illness. You are gathering data. Your animal is gathering data too, and in some ways, it is more efficient at it. Reptiles process certain types of sensory information with extraordinary precision. Pit vipers can detect thermal differentials of 0.003 degrees Celsius. Monitor lizards have been shown in lab settings to discriminate between individual humans based on visual and olfactory cues and to retain those distinctions over months. Your specific chemical signature, the particular way you move when you are about to open the enclosure, the vibration pattern of your approach, all of it is being cataloged. A well-socialized reptile that tenses when a stranger approaches but relaxes when you do is not reacting randomly. It has built a model of you specifically, and it is using that model every time you enter the room. That is not just impressive. It means your behavioral consistency matters in ways that go beyond husbandry checklists. Number 7. Some of them are losing the wild, and that has consequences. There is a quiet tension in reptile keeping that the community does not always address openly. The animals who keep most successfully, the ones that thrive across generations in captivity, are increasingly animals that have been selected, whether intentionally through breeding programs or unintentionally through survival rates, for tolerance of human proximity and captive conditions. In some ways, that is a conservation and welfare win. In other ways, it represents a genuine loss. A ball python morph that has never experienced the dry season, never had to fast through months of prey scarcity, never navigated a real thermal gradient across several meters of savanna, carries those behavioral subroutines in its genome, but may never run them. Researchers studying captive wildlife behavior have noted that long-term captive individuals of many species show feed foraging and predator avoidance behaviors compared to their wild counterparts. The wildness does not disappear overnight. It fades across seasons and generations. For keepers who care about these animals as more than display pieces, that is worth sitting with. Number 8. The animal that waits for you every morning has made a choice. I saved this one for last because it is not really about thermoregulation, feeding schedules, or husbandry metrics. It is about something quieter. The reptile in your care, whether it is a blue tongue that comes to the front of its enclosure when it hears your voice, or a monitor that presses its nose to the glass when you walk past, or a corn snake that sits calmly coiled in your hands for an hour, is not doing those things by accident. Somewhere in the interaction between its ancient nervous system and the hundreds of consistent, safe, warm, food-associated moments you have provided, it chose, in whatever way a reptile chooses, to orient toward you rather than away from you. That is not nothing. That is an animal operating on an evolutionary threat response system that predates mammals, deciding you are safe, deciding you are part of its world. And the way you find out how real that is, the way most keepers discover how much it actually means, is the moment something breaks, and you have to rehome an animal, when illness or circumstance disrupts the routine, when the ecosystem you built for them collapses without warning. They do not understand why. They just know the world that made sense yesterday does not make sense today. You did not set out to become someone's entire environment. You just wanted to keep something extraordinary. But the moment you committed to daily care, you became part of their survival equation, and they became part of yours. That is not a burden, but it is a responsibility worth understanding clearly every time you lift that lid. Before I go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a reptile that clearly recognized you, responded to you specifically, or seemed to wait for you? Tell me in the comments what species, what the behavior was, and how long it took to develop. I read every one of them, and what this community shares about these animals never stops being fascinating. I will see you in the next one.